After a brutal hospital slap from her own father, she discovered a secret that flipped her entire life, and the house, upside down. They say hospitals are sanctuaries of recovery. For some, maybe they are. But for me, it became the setting of my final unraveling. The fluorescent light above my bed flickered like a dying star. I was still in surgical scrubs, the side of my torso taut with fresh stitches, the acrid tang of antiseptic clinging to my skin. A dull throb in my ribs reminded me I was alive, barely. Then the door crashed open. "Pay rent or get the hell out," my father bellowed, his voice slicing through the sterile air like shattered glass. For a heartbeat, all I could do was stare. My body froze, still halfway tethered to drip. I couldn't comprehend the words, not immediately. "Not here. Not now." I said no, I murmured, almost without sound. His palm flew through the air before I had time to brace. The slap cracked across my face with the sharpness of bone meeting bone. My body jolted, crashing off the hospital bed to the unforgiving tile. Pain tore through my side. Copper filled my mouth. "You think you're too good for us now?" he hissed, looming above me, eyes narrow with something that wasn't rage, it was disdain. Like I was a stain he couldn't scrub out. I lay there on the cold floor, cheek burning, vision blurred. But one thought burned bright and steady through the haze. He has no idea what I'm capable of. And this time I won't stay down. It began 3 months earlier, the day I returned to the one place I swore I'd never live again. Not by choice, never by choice. But when the clinic slashed my hours and rent climbed past what 2 shifts could cover, I folded. Folded for Joshua. She's only 6. She needs stability more than I need self-respect. My father, Robert, though no one dared call him that, said it was temporary. But the moment I rolled my suitcase into the cramped spare room, the one with a sagging ceiling and wallpaper peeling like dead skin, I knew better. Nothing with him ever came without debt. At first, it was petty stuff. Groceries. Gas. "Fix the internet," he said, "you're the one streaming all night." I kept paying, kept nodding, kept swallowing my pride like a bitter pill. Skipped my own dental appointments just to keep the fridge full. Then there was my brother. Matthew, 2 years younger and permanently adrift, still lived at home. Still unemployed. Still wore the crown of my father's affection like it was forged in gold. I'd drag myself through 12-hour shifts, walk in with aching feet, and find him sprawled on the couch in his boxers, yelling at his controller. Dad would sigh, voice heavy with indulgence. "He's going through something. Depression. You wouldn't understand." Apparently, depression didn't stop him from draining my credit card on Uber Eats every night, just until his account unfreezes. They never asked. They expected. Dad's tone would drop into that low, ice-edged register that used to make me hide in closets as a child. "Family takes care of its own," he'd say. But what he meant was, "You owe us. We owe you nothing." Joshua noticed before I admitted it out loud. She stopped singing on the ride home. Her drawings became darker. One night, she clutched her stuffed bunny with white-knuckled hands and whispered, "Is Grandpa mad at me too?" That night, I wept silently into my pillow, the sobs smothered so she wouldn't hear. A week before the hospital, things spiraled. Matthew had blown through another credit card, this time on some get-rich-quick crypto scam. Dad came to me like it was obvious, like it was ordained. "You'll take care of it," he said, his voice flat. "I can't," I told him. "I'm saving up for Joshua's inhalers." His jaw twitched. "Her lungs or your brother's future, which one matters more?" That's when it hit me, they were gone. So far gone I didn't even recognize them anymore. The day of the crash, I'd worked a double overnight. The rain made the highway slick, reflective like black ice. I blinked, just once, too long at a red light. A truck turned across the lane. I never saw it coming. Impact. Metal shrieked. My car spun like a coin. When I opened my eyes, I was strapped to a gurney, soaked and shivering. I couldn't feel my fingers. "Joshua," I gasped. "Where's Joshua?" The doctors told me I was lucky. 6 stitches along the ribcage. A wrist sprain. Bruised hip. They kept me overnight. For observation, they said. He came the next morning. No flowers. No concern. Not even a glance at my chart. Just the same voice that had haunted every corner of my childhood. Pay rent or get out. Then came the slap. They discharged me with a bottle of codeine, a wrap for my wrist, and an offhand reminder to rest for a few days. But how do you rest in a house that feels like a war zone? When I returned, he was in the kitchen. Calm. Reading the paper like nothing had happened. The slap wasn't mentioned. Neither was the hospital. Did you remember to transfer this month's utility payment? He asked, without looking up. I didn't answer. He sipped his coffee. Your room uses the most heat. And that kid of yours always leaves the lights on. My throat tightened, but I nodded. I always nodded. Even now. But something in me had shifted. Something irreversible. That night, I perched on the edge of Joshua's bed, watching her sleep in the glow of the hallway light. Her breath came in soft, steady pulses, lashes fanned across flushed cheeks. I reached out and lightly traced the faint scar on her face, a fading remnant of a playground fall. Just weeks ago, it had felt like a catastrophe. Now, surrounded by deeper wounds, hers felt like a relic from a time when pain was simpler. I no longer panicked over bruises. Not mine, anyway. Not when I'd grown used to being invisible in my own family. The next morning, I found something slid beneath my bedroom door, a sheet of printer paper, not handwriting. Cold. Impersonal. Effective immediately, household rent will increase by $200 per month due to rising shared expenses. Payment expected by Friday. Sincerely, House Management, G. White. A management letter. From my father. I read it 3 times, then laughed, sharp, bitter, joyless. The kind of laugh that comes when every other option is rage. I texted him. Is this some kind of joke? His reply came fast, as always, like he'd been waiting. You live here. You pay what I say. That's life. Welcome to adulthood. No warning. No discussion. Just another decree from a man who mistook power for parenting. 2 days later, Matthew knocked, not out of courtesy, but habit. He didn't meet my gaze. Hey, he muttered. Dad said you could cover my car insurance this month. I blinked. Your car's been parked for weeks. He gave a half shrug. Still need it insured. You know. Just in case. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stared at him, wondering if he even realized how hollow he'd become. I had become the household's silent sponsor, their backup plan, their bailout fund. A walking wallet. Even Joshua felt it. Mommy, she whispered one evening, as we stood brushing our teeth side by side. Why does Grandpa only smile when you give him money? I dropped the toothbrush into the sink. My throat locked so tightly I couldn't respond. She was 6. And she already knew. Something inside me twisted the next day, something sharp, something final. Kimberly, my oldest friend from nursing school, stopped by unannounced. She brought groceries, a new throw blanket, and an energy I hadn't felt in a long time, calm, unwavering, real. I've been calling, she said softly, unpacking items into my empty pantry. You've been gone. I broke then. The dam cracked wide open. I told her everything. The slap. The rent letter. Joshua's 2 wise eyes. I sobbed until I could barely breathe. She waited until I was quiet. Then, without a word, she reached into her bag and pulled out a brass key. Betty, your mom gave me this, she said. Told me to keep it safe. And to give it to you, when things got too hard. I stared at it. The key was worn with time, cool and solid in her hand. A single letter, M, etched into its base. I didn't speak. I just reached for it, slowly, as if it might vanish if I moved too fast. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake with the key resting in my palm, the metal imprinting against my skin. Joshua had fallen asleep curled against me, her stuffed bunny wedged between us, unaware that the ground beneath our feet had begun to shift. My mother had died 3 years earlier, ovarian cancer. Swift. Merciless. Unfair. She and my father had separated long before that, and she'd lived alone in a modest house her father left her. She never remarried. Never asked for much. I hadn't returned to that house since we scattered her ashes. But now, here was a key to something she'd locked away from the world, and maybe even from me, until the moment she knew I would need it most. The next morning, I poured a thermos of tea, kissed Joshua goodbye at school, and drove east, out toward the old neighborhood, toward the small corner lot I hadn't seen since the funeral. The house stood exactly as I remembered, weathered clapboards, faded green trim, wind chimes still dancing lazily by the front door. Inside, the scent of lavender and worn pages enveloped me. Time felt suspended here. A quilt still lay across the old rocking chair. A mug, untouched, sat beneath a dust-frosted windowpane. It was as if the house had been waiting, patient and unchanged. I wandered, fingers grazing bookshelves, curtain edges, doorknobs. My heart beat in my throat. Nothing unusual. Nothing secret, until I stepped into her bedroom. There, in the far corner, a locked filing cabinet. Matte gray, solid, ancient. It had always been off-limits. I remembered asking about it as a child. She'd smiled gently and changed the subject. Now, with the key in hand, I knelt before it. The lock turned with a quiet snap. The drawer rasped open with the groan of old metal. Inside, rows of carefully labeled folders arranged like puzzle pieces she knew I'd one day need. Property, East Oak. Bank. Trust account. Letters to J. I reached for the final file, fingers trembling. Inside were 3 things. 1. A notarized letter naming me as sole heir to my grandfather's estate. 2. The deed, not to her house, but to the one I was living in now. My father's house. 3. A note. Written by her hand. If you're reading this, it means you've carried more than I ever wanted for you. They will take until you vanish. This house belongs to you now. Use it. Protect Joshua. And don't let guilt be the leash they use to keep you tethered. Love, Mom. The words hit like a wave. I sank to the floor, clinging to the folder like a lifeline. All this time, the house my father used as a weapon, the roof he dangled over us like a threat, wasn't even his. It was mine. And suddenly, for the first time in years, I saw a path forward that didn't end in sacrifice. I didn't return home that night. Kimberly insisted I stay. Joshua was overjoyed. A spontaneous sleepover with her godmother felt like an adventure, not an escape. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I slept without fear. No footsteps outside the door, no creaking hallway floorboards, no knots in my chest. I woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of Joshua laughing in the kitchen, something light and full, a sound I hadn't heard in weeks. That was the moment I knew, surviving wasn't enough anymore. This time I would reclaim what was already mine. No more begging for space inside a home that belonged to me. When I walked through the front door, the air had a strange density to it, like the house already sensed the tide shifting. My father sat at the kitchen table, hunched over a napkin, scribbling his infamous back-of-the-envelope budget, no doubt calculating how much more he could wring out of me before I snapped. Matthew was stretched across the couch, headset clamped to his ears, cereal bowl balanced on his chest like a lazy trophy. Neither of them acknowledged me. "Where were you?" my father asked eventually, not bothering to look up. I took my time answering. "With Joshua. We stayed at Kimberly's." He scoffed. "Next time, let someone know. You don't just walk out of someone else's house." I almost laughed. "If only you knew." That week, I began building my case, quietly, methodically. Like a nurse preparing for triage, I gathered every record, every wound. Utility bills with my name. Screenshots of rent payments. Matthew's Venmo transfers, annotated with idiotic messages like, "THX again, you are the best, LOL." I bought a cheap external hard drive and labeled a folder. Documentation, White Residence. Every night, after Joshua had fallen asleep, I added to it. Statements. Receipts. Video clips. Kimberly helped me file the deed confirmation with the county. It was all there in black and white. The house belonged solely to me. No liens. No joint ownership. Just a clean title, secured through a trust my grandfather created and my mother protected with eerie foresight. This house, the one my father weaponized, was never his. The realization didn't bring peace. It brought rage. A fury so quiet it vibrated beneath my skin. But I stayed silent. Controlled. Until the final crack formed. It was a Tuesday night. I had just come off a short shift, ribs still sore but healing. Joshua was sitting cross-legged on her bed, her stuffed bunny in her lap, fingers twisting its ears. Her eyes were distant. Grandpa said if I keep leaving the lights on, we might have to leave, she whispered. The floor tilted under me. He was threatening her now, wrapping her small, innocent world in his shadow. I sat beside her, gently brushing the hair from her face. This is our home, baby, I whispered. No one can take it from us. Not ever again. She didn't speak. Just curled tighter around her bunny. That night, I recorded a video. I stared into the camera lens, voice clear, breath steady. I told the truth, the hospital slap, the escalating demands, the manipulation, the emotional wreckage. I included clips of Matthew on his livestream, bragging about how he didn't pay Jack because my sister handles it all. I saved it to the folder on the drive. File name, just in case, for Joshua. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was prepared. 2 days later, I sat across from the same attorney who had helped handle Mom's estate. A quiet man with kind eyes and a relentless sense of order. When I finished explaining, he didn't blink. You have full legal grounds to evict, he said. And based on the emotional abuse and the assault, you could pursue a protection order if you wish. I slid the papers toward him, my hand trembling just once before it steadied. For the record, I said quietly, this isn't about revenge. He looked up. Then why now? I smiled, not with malice, but with certainty. Because I'm done trading silence for survival. I waited until Saturday morning. The house was still, sun just beginning to spill through the blinds. Joshua lay curled in a blanket on the couch, the aftermath of a movie night still scattered across the coffee table. I moved through the kitchen with practiced calm. Made coffee. Poured. Breathed. The ritual soothed me, even as the weight of what was coming pressed behind my ribs like a held breath. Dad shuffled in, scratching his jaw. No good morning. No glance. Where's the rent? He asked, like he was requesting the weather. I set the mug down gently. I'm not paying rent anymore. He froze mid-step. Turned, slowly. What did you just say? I met his stare, my voice steady. I said no. Again. The silence between us thickened. This is about the hospital? He scoffed, his laugh sharp. You think I owe you something because you banged up your ribs? You wouldn't even be standing if it weren't for this roof over your head. I took a breath. You mean the roof I own? For just a second, his mask slipped. A flicker of disbelief crossed his face, not fear yet, but something close. Then, as always, it twisted into rage. You ungrateful little, he snarled, stepping toward me. I didn't flinch. I lifted the folder, deed, trust documents, tax records, and laid it flat on the counter between us. My name printed on every page like a quiet anthem. Matthew wandered in, bleary-eyed and shirtless, a half-eaten bowl of cereal in one hand. What's happening? He mumbled. She thinks she owns the place now, Dad snapped, his voice rising like a warning flare. You believe this nonsense? Matthew squinted at the folder, then scoffed. You? Please. You couldn't manage a Netflix account, let alone a house deed. I turned to him. My voice was low, sharp. The only reason you've had heat, Wi-Fi, and food delivered to your face every day is because I paid for it. Every single bill. Every time you hit order again. His smirk slipped. He looked away. Dad's chest rose as he stepped in closer, towering over me like he always had, like proximity was power. This is still my house, he said through clenched teeth. I built this life. You don't get to take that away from me. You didn't build anything, I said, voice calm but iron-hard. Mom's father did. He left it to her. And she left it to me, quietly, intentionally. Because she knew you'd do exactly this. For a second, no one said anything. The air thickened. Then, as always, he pivoted. His tone softened, like a memory he thought I still missed. You're really going to kick out your own family? He asked, eyes wide with manufactured disbelief. After everything we've done for you? After everything we've survived? Guilt, his favorite currency. I didn't blink. I'm not evicting family, I said. I'm removing the rot. Matthew let out a short, bitter laugh. So that's it? You think you're some kind of savior now? Gonna rescue your kid and ride off into the sunset with a deed in your pocket? I looked at him and let the chill rise in my voice. No. I'm just finally putting locks where they should have been a long time ago. He snarled. Then, with a clatter, hurled his cereal bowl across the room. It hit the tile, shattered, milk and ceramic splattered across my shoes. Behind me, I heard the rustle of blankets. Mom? Joshua's voice was small, sleepy, scared. I turned instantly. It's okay, sweetheart. She looked past me, at her grandfather, at her uncle, then back into my face. Are we leaving? I crouched beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her eyes. No, baby, I whispered. They are. The notice arrived Monday morning. Certified, stamped, and hand-delivered by a county deputy. I wasn't home when it came. I was at Joshua's school, helping shelve books in the library. When I returned, I saw the envelope taped to the front door, bold red lettering visible even from the street. Through the living room window, I caught a glimpse of Dad, standing rigid with the paper crushed in his hand, Matthew pacing behind him like a cornered animal. I stepped inside. You think you can do this to us? Dad barked, the moment the door shut behind me. After everything we've given up for you? I didn't raise my voice. You mean after the day you slapped me in a hospital bed? His face contorted. He flung the notice across the table. This is war. Matthew crossed his arms in the corner, jaw tight. We're not leaving. You have 30 days, I said simply. You know the law. The backlash came fast. The next afternoon, as I pulled into the driveway, Carol, the elderly neighbor from across the street, was waiting at my mailbox, arms folded, her expression sharper than usual. I heard you're throwing your father out, she said, without greeting. I blinked. What? He told me about the diagnosis. Something with his lungs. Said you won't even drive him to the doctor. Of course he did. I stepped inside and found him slumped theatrically on the couch, a crumpled tissue in his hand, wheezing just loud enough to carry through the walls. He had spun the story fast. And Matthew, nowhere to be seen, was no doubt playing his part online, wringing sympathy from faceless strangers while painting me as the cold, ungrateful villain. The house was growing tight with performance. That night, the doorbell rang. It was Amanda, the girl from 3 houses down, the one I used to babysit in high school. She stood awkwardly on the porch, phone in hand. Hey, she said. Can I show you something? She held up her phone. A video played, shaky but unmistakable. Dad, in the hospital room. His voice rising. The slap. My body hitting the floor. The sound of Joshua screaming. My stomach dropped. I didn't know what to do with it, Amanda said. I work part-time in that unit. I saw it happen. Before they could delete it from the hospital servers, I saved it. I didn't know when to give it to you. I took the phone. My hands trembled. Proof. Raw. Unfiltered. Undeniable. I looked up, my voice barely audible. Thank you. She nodded. If he tries anything else, you won't be alone. Inside, Joshua was sitting quietly at the table, her marker spread out in front of her, the outlines of a rabbit half-colored on the page. I sat beside her. She didn't look up, just kept coloring in silence. We're doing the right thing, I whispered, not just to her, but to the version of myself that had once believed silence was safer. And this time, I believed it. She glanced up at me, then back down at her drawing, two small figures holding hands in front of a little house, sunlight beaming from a golden circle above. And for the first time in a long while, she smiled. The eviction was scheduled for Friday morning. I rose before dawn, nerves humming beneath my skin like exposed wires. In the dim light, Joshua slept soundly, arm wrapped tightly around Bunny. The early sun painted her cheeks in soft gold. I leaned down, pressed a kiss to her forehead, and whispered, "Today's the day." In the hallway, the air felt thick, electric with what was coming. Dad was already pacing in the kitchen, barefoot and agitated. His eyes landed on the clipboard in my hands and darkened. "You really think some deputy's gonna throw me out of my own house?" he growled. I said nothing. I didn't have to anymore. By 9 o'clock, the county deputy pulled up, all professionalism and protocol. Clipboard. Badge. Neutral eyes. Amanda stood across the street, arms folded, phone at the ready. Carol lurked behind her curtains, a silhouette of disappro Carol. I stepped out onto the front porch, heart pounding, hands steady. The deputy began walking up the path. Dad erupted. "She's throwing her own father into the street," he bellowed. "You should be arresting her, she's the abuser." The deputy didn't flinch. "Mr. White," he said flatly. "This eviction is lawful and final. You were served. Today is the court-approved deadline. You are required to vacate the premises." Matthew slouched behind him, hoodie half-zipped, eyes bloodshot. "You're making a huge mistake, Jess," he muttered. "No one's going to believe your version." I pulled a flash drive from my pocket and held it up. "They already do." I plugged it into the deputy's tablet. The screen lit up, a clip of the hospital room, the slap, my collapse, Joshua's cry. He watched in silence, then nodded. "This is more than enough." Dad took a step forward, jaw clenched, but the deputy moved in front of me. "Sir," he warned, "one more step and you'll be detained." Matthew's stare turned bitter. "You think this is justice?" "This is just payback." "No," I said. "This is a boundary, the kind you never respected." A few neighbors had drifted out by now. Curiosity painted across their faces. Phones raised. Whispers spreading like wildfire. Carol stepped outside, her arms crossed. "You could have handled this quietly," she snapped. "You don't throw away family." I turned toward her, voice firm but calm. "Family doesn't hit you while you're still bleeding. Family doesn't make your child afraid to turn on the lights." A ripple moved through the small crowd. Someone across the street murmured, "Wait, what?" I stepped onto the porch, legal papers in hand. This house belonged to my mother. My grandfather passed it to her. She left it to me, in writing, legally, and without question. I've covered every bill here for years while being insulted, manipulated, and abused. That ends now. Dad's chest heaved, eyes darting across the street, searching for someone, anyone, to take his side. But no one moved. And then he did the only thing he had left, he pointed at Joshua, who had quietly walked out to stand beside me. "You're destroying her life," he spat. Joshua looked up at him. Her voice was small, but it cut through everything. "You hurt my mom. That's what ruined it." Silence fell like a stone. Dad opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Matthew stared at her like she was a stranger. And that was the moment they both knew, it was over. Not just the house, but the grip. The deputy handed me a final form, stamped and signed. "Ma'am," he said. "The property is now fully in your possession. No contest." Dad's shoulders sagged. Matthew dropped his duffel on the porch with a thud. They left. At the bottom of the steps, Dad turned once more. "You'll regret this." I met his eyes, steady and unblinking. "No," I said. "What I regret is not doing it sooner." Behind me, Joshua slid her hand into mine. We walked inside and shut the door. She looked up. "We're safe now, right?" I crouched down, pressed my forehead to hers. "Yes, baby," I whispered. "We are." 2 weeks later, we moved. Even though the house was legally mine, I couldn't stay there. The walls still held echoes, of slamming doors, of words like daggers, of nights spent swallowing my voice. The ghosts weren't literal, but they were loud. So, I sold it, quietly, without drama. No listing. No goodbye tour. And I used the money to rent a small cottage across town. Nothing grand. 2 bedrooms. A postage stamp porch. Lavender bushes that bloomed beneath the kitchen window. But it was peaceful. And it was ours. Joshua chose her room right away, the one facing east so the sun would wake Bunny first. I let her pick the paint color. She chose pale sky blue. The color of open skies. Of new beginnings. Each night now, Joshua slept without stirring, no more midnight flinches, no soft cries laced with dreams. Only the steady rhythm of her breath, calm and unbroken. The kind of sleep that only arrives when the monsters have been banished, or at least named. I started therapy. Sat in a small, sunlit room and began to speak the things I had only ever whispered into pillows. The guilt. The exhaustion. The decades of stretching myself thin, trying to be enough for people who never tried to be enough for me. And little by little, like removing glass from skin, I began to heal. Kimberly visited often. Sometimes with coffee, sometimes with pie, always with her quiet, grounding presence. We didn't need to talk much. Sometimes we just sat in silence while Joshua painted in the corner, her brush dipped in color, her world finally quiet enough to imagine safely. One evening, Kimberly glanced at me across the table. "You're different," she said gently. I looked up, met her eyes. "I'm lighter," I replied. Like I stopped dragging bricks I thought were mine to carry. She nodded, saying nothing. She didn't need to. One breezy Sunday, Joshua stood beside me on the porch, brushing Bunny's ears with a tiny toothbrush she'd found in a drawer. The morning sun filtered through her hair, catching in the strands like gold threads. "Mom," she asked, tilting her head toward me. "Do you think Bunny's proud of us?" I smiled, heart folding gently in my chest. "I think Bunny always knew," I said, "that we were stronger than we believed." She leaned into me, soft and solid and real, her small hand slipping into mine like it had always belonged there. Around us, the lavender swayed in the wind. The sky above was pale and open, no longer pressing down, no longer waiting to break. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I didn't feel like we were just surviving. We were living. Really, finally living.